All right, g'day everybody and welcome to Rolling Conversations this Tuesday. We hope you've had a good week and we're really pleased tonight to have an athlete with us tonight who is not necessarily from our wheelchair sports community in New South Wales, but certainly an athlete that we've watched. We love watching him. He's a tremendous athlete and achieved great things, 10 gold medals at World Championships. He's a Paralympian. He is an All Black supporter. We'll get to that. But nonetheless, we still like him. Curtis McGrath, OAM, welcome to Rolling Conversations.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. As I say, you aren't a New South Welshman, but give us a bit of an insight, Curtis, if you wouldn't mind. Just what was young Curtis like? Whereabouts did you grow up and what was family life like for you?
Yeah, so as you alluded to before, I'm a Kiwi and I grew up in the South Island in Queenstown in New Zealand, so a very adventurous and outdoorsy sort of place. So I had like snowboarding and kayaking as part of my school curriculum, so it was a great place to grow up. And when I was 10, I moved over to WA for 4 years, just living on a farm. Just parents wanted a lifestyle change, and so we moved up and moved over there. And I went to boarding school in Perth for a year, the first year of high school, and then we moved back to Queenstown and finished off high school there. So I got my dual citizenship and I could join the Australian Army, but I couldn't be a politician and still can't yet. So yeah, it's a very active upbringing. It was good.
Well, we'd vote for you if that means anything. And in terms of school, did you enjoy school? Were you any good at it? What sort of subjects did you like?
Yeah, I think I was more interested in being outdoors and using, my physicality in a way to run up hills and play sport. And I was never amazing at anything in particular. It's probably because I had such a diverse opportunity there, and kayaking in the summer and playing cricket, and then in the winter I'd be playing rugby and going hiking or snowboarding. So it was just one of those things that I was a little bit distracted in what was around me, but at the same time, I was okay at like science and things like that, but over my schooling results, unfortunately, the transition between the West Australian school and the New Zealand school, I missed out on like the foundations of mathematics in high school. So I got to New Zealand and all of a sudden there was letters in my numbers and I had no idea what was going on, and I'd sort of missed that whole phase of learning what algebra was. So that was a bit of a trip up on the way to mathematical genius, and I'm still trying to figure that out.
Still trying to get there. Hey, you mentioned growing up in New Zealand for parts of your young life. Then anyone growing up in New Zealand, rugby would be a big part of their life, I'm sure. Tell us about that. Did you enjoy playing rugby? What position did you play?
Yeah, I sort of played a number of positions over my time in the sport. I started on the wing and then moved to fullback, and then as I got a little bit bigger, I moved into the centres area, and then as I got near the end of after school, I continued to play in the army, and I moved into the forwards because it was just a little bit more entertaining. There was a bit more happening, and running for nothing was a little bit of a deterrent there. But at the same time, I really enjoyed the game, and I still try and watch as much as I can as well.
Is there any point at which you switch your allegiance to the Wallabies from the All Blacks? Can you imagine that time?
No, I can't, unfortunately. But I think both teams need each other, and as much as the Wallabies have been having some difficult times of late, the All Blacks wouldn't be the All Blacks without the Wallabies. And I think if the Wallabies team, gets back on the horse and starts kicking some butt, it's only going to make Southern Hemisphere rugby stronger and stronger, which I believe is where the dominance currently lies in the globe. But the English and the French like to have a say about that every now and then.
Absolutely. Hey, and swimming was a big part of growing up too, weren't you? What was your stroke?
I would say my favourite would be backstroke, but I was good at butterfly as well. So just a few different things, but I really enjoyed swimming. It made living in West Australia was where it sort of cemented for me that swimming was an enjoyable hobby, and being in amongst the water was something that I really enjoyed, and that having that sort of foundation strength in swimming. We're training 3-4 days a week, which is quite a lot when you live 45 minutes out in the bush from the local pool, and having that trip each day, and having my parents having to come in and get you because the school bus is catering for almost like 1,000 kilometers a week worth of driving. So it's one of those sports that is I really think is important for youth to enable them for even just for water safety, but that also helps now and out in the kayak. So yeah.
We've got a comment there from Deb Harding, who's in our office, Curtis, who's a Kiwi. She says, no, All Blacks all the way. So Deb, just see me in my office in the morning. We'll have a chat about that. Some disciplinary action coming your way. So, Curtis, you've spoken about your schooling and as a young man, and so you did go into the armed forces in Australia, and you became a combat engineer. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know what a combat engineer is. Can you please explain to us, what does that involve?
Yeah, so the official role of a combat engineer is to provide mobility and deny mobility, and that sort of basically means we can build roads where you can't drive to allow that mobility, but we also, and bridges, but we can also destroy that infrastructure. Another thing is we can purify salt water, so making potable water, and construction, deconstruction, but also overcoming defences as well. So defences would be under the realm of fallen trees. You can fell a line of trees in a certain way to make them interlocking, make them very difficult to get around, but also landmines, landslides, all that sort of stuff. So it's a very broad role in terms of what our capability is, and we're one of the only corps in the military that can self-sustain in the battlefield. So we can provide our own water. I'm sure with a rifle in your hand, you can probably hunt some food as well. So it's one of those things that is quite proud of, but at the same time, it's a very hard job to be good at everything.
Yeah, right. Wow, that is interesting. Thank you. Now, we've got a message there from Andrew Tebbett, who says, "G'day, Curtis. I'm an ex-engineer as well. I wanted to say I had a below-knee amputation 4 months ago. Is there someone in New South Wales I could talk to about getting involved in para-canoe, which, of course, is your sport?" And I failed to mention that at the start, but yeah, as a para-canoeist. So a question there from Andrew.
Yeah. So there's currently, off the top of my head, we have one Paralympic athlete based in New South Wales. That's Dylan Littlehales. He's based up at Narrabeen, and he has a coach, Jake Michaels, who's also coaching Murray Stewart whilst Murray's down in Sydney. But that squad is quite quick, and when you're just starting out, it can be a bit tricky. But definitely get in touch with Paddle Australia, because our high performance coach, is in the role of talent ID, and would be able to provide equipment and maybe even a club, because that's the process. You sort of identify a club, and then you move on to, you do well and get your foundations of your skills and ability, and then move on to competition, and then hopefully you can make it onto the world team.
Yeah, great. Oh, well, Ali, who's our marketing manager, who's producing tonight's segment, might put a link then to Paddling Australia in the comments section, and Andrew can follow that up and get involved. That's great. What a good outcome from Rolling Conversations. We're getting people involved in sport, which is what we're all about. So, Curtis, I spoke to you. Obviously, your story is very well known in Afghanistan in 2012, where after an accident, you lost your legs in an explosion there. And what we spoke about doing, because we couldn't possibly do that extraordinary story justice tonight, is, and if you haven't heard it, we're going to put a link to Kurt Fernley's Tiny Island podcast, which you and Kurt had a great yarn over an hour or so, and you spoke in great detail about the accident that brought you into the Paralympic family. Just out of interest, what was that like, sitting down for an hour with Kurt Fernley? Obviously, you guys had met before, but he's a pretty special human.
He's a remarkable human, and he's very articulate, and the questions in which he asked in that podcast were very. They drew out a lot of information and a lot of detail, and he's a great person as well, and consider him a good friend of mine. So I'm very lucky to have that honour.
Yeah, cool. Now I feel like you're judging me as an interviewer, so I'm going to have to off my game. Out of interest, though, it is a story you've told many times. I would just pausing on that for a second. What happens to that story over time for you? Does it become easier to tell? Does it become harder to tell? What's your experience like of having? I mean, as a corporate speaker, you must have told it hundreds of times. What happens to the story over time?
Yeah, I think being able to tell the story was quite therapeutic, and like you said at the start, it was quite difficult to tell and relay the emotional elements to an audience. But practice makes perfect, and I wouldn't say pushing emotion down is perfect, but it makes telling the story in a way that's engaging and flowing and brings forward details of the story that people can follow in a more sort of professional manner in a way. But at the same time, now I don't mind telling the story at all, and I'm. It is one that, like you said, it can be a little long-winded, but at the same time, it's one of those stories that I hope that a lot of people learn from and can take away some lessons in which I've learned, and whether it be the mind blast or what happens later on in life.
Well, I commend the story to everybody watching on in our community online. Please do go and have a look, and Ali's put the link there to go and have a listen to Curtis and Kurt talking through that story. I want to talk about the Paralympics. So mentioned that you're in para-canoe. Can you qualify for me? I think you race the 200 metres in two different events within para-canoe. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So I started in the sport in the V1 or the Va'a canoe, which is an outrigger style canoe. It's got no rudder. So you have to steer the boat with your stroke or the paddle. And it's a very stable boat, but at the same time, if you lean the wrong way and you don't have the paddle on the right side of the boat, you will flip out. So that's one boat. I was the world champion in that in 2014, my first year, so I was very lucky to pick up a paddle and be so successful straight up. But the other sport I did or have done and done it quite well is the K1, so the Paracanoe K1, and I'm in the KL2 class for that. But I'm in the VL3 class for the outrigger, so the V1. So it's a little bit, there's a lot of detail and classification gets a little bit hard to explain in a short time. But it's just the kayak came along because the V1 was actually taken out of the Paralympic sporting calendar or schedule for Rio and was replaced. And that was due to my disability being in the middle of the classes. So there's only 3 classes. And if someone rocked up at World Championships at the last final qualifying event and was then suddenly classed up or down outside of my class, they then had to or couldn't paddle the V1 anymore. So it was a smart decision, but at the time it was the World Championship qualifying year. The Paralympic qualifying year, and to make that decision then was very difficult. And one of my main lessons that I've learned over time. And understanding that the decisions might not be one that is the best one for you at the time, but for a bigger picture and understanding that focusing on what you want to do and want to achieve is also worth the push and the effort to get back up there and work hard to achieve that.
Mm. So you've within World Championships, you've won 10 gold medals and a silver medal, and then within the Paralympics, you won the 1 gold medal in Rio in 2016. I'm just interested. I can't remember watching a World Championships on TV, so not that that necessarily means no one else has, but I imagine there's a vast difference between the coverage the World Championships get in your sport and, of course, a Paralympic. So, does that change things when you're at the start for the 200 metres in Rio, knowing the eyes of the world on you? Does that ratchet up the pressure on you? Do you feel that?
It was funny. So I'll relate to what happened in Rio and that race. And I'd said that I would go to the Paralympics on the back of the stretcher, getting carried to the helicopter landing zone. And for me to make it there was, a huge achievement. But for me to line up in the middle lane, which means we're the highest qualifying boat in that for that race, and to come across the line ahead of everyone else and win that gold medal, it wasn't until I crossed the finish line, that I actually felt that there was pressure. It was this, I was expecting, excitement and joy, but what I felt was this huge wave of relief came over me. And that was because of the pressure that I put on myself. And I don't believe there was any pressure from anyone else. It was all my doing and me pressuring myself to achieve and push myself so hard. And that was one of the things that I'll never forget, that feeling. It felt like sort of having a fright in a way. And that's what that felt like to me. And having achieved it all was I think, that was the final moment of pressure. And if I hadn't achieved what I did in Rio, I might not have felt that pressure at all. It might have been something that I might feel if I was successful in Tokyo next year. So it would have been interesting to see what would have happened there. But like I said, I didn't know it was there until I crossed the line. So
wow, I've never heard of that. It was unexpected then, that feeling after you finished.
Yeah, very unexpected. So like I said, it was I was expecting excitement and joy, but I didn't really feel that until I was sort of walking towards the podium and being pretty happy about everything that had happened. And even when I pulled up to the pontoon to get out off the water, it was a strange sort of feeling, because everyone was excited and I was like, I've done it. Like, it's a very hard feeling to process, for sure.
I wonder whether Kathy Freeman would relate to that. I recall when she won the 400 metres in Sydney, and I was there that night on the 25th of September, the year 2000. It was my birthday. But she sat on the track afterwards, if you recall, for minutes, with the crowd going absolutely berserk. And it just looked like the weight of the world was still on her in a way. I wonder whether she'd relate to what you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I would imagine that it'd be a feeling that a lot of athletes get, when they've worked so hard for so long, and there might be a little bit more weight to myself and Kathy's plight to get to the top of the podium, and having that happen and feeling that relief that you've done it is it's a unique feeling, and I'm sure I'm not the only one out there that has it.
And so how does that change things for Tokyo? You referenced that next year, and fingers crossed we're there and it's fantastic. But how does that change your mentality? In other words, is there pressure to go back to back now, or how do you feel in the lead into Tokyo?
So for me, I'm the Paralympic champion in only one of the two events. And yes, I'm the world champion in both the events, but I don't have that Paralympic medal. So I think the V1 is a sport. Obviously, it was my introduction to sprint kayaking, or sprint canoeing, as it's group called. But at the games in Tokyo, I think it's going to be one of those events that, especially the V1, is going to be an event that I might feel that again, that feeling. But I'll just be happy with the podium result, and if I get to that stage, and if we all get there as well, it's just going to be an amazing place, and I'm really looking forward to getting there.
Yeah, awesome. We can't wait to watch you. As I say, our community loves you. We followed what you've done, and we continue to follow what you do, and we can't wait to see you rip in Tokyo next year. Sarah Stewart, a board member of ours, multi-Paralympian, and you know Sarah well, says, "G'day, Curtis, love your work. What are you passionate about achieving or doing outside the canoe?"
For me, this is actually a difficult question, because I don't really think too far ahead when it comes to achievements or goals. I'm very focused on what I'm doing now, in the sense that what I'm doing now might help me achieve something at the games or in my sport. But outside of sport, like you said before, I do a bit of public speaking, and I quite enjoy that, sharing my story and helping people learn to do or take away lessons from my adversity and push through the hard times. But after sport, I'm not sure what I'm going to be up to at this stage. I'm doing a bit of study at the moment, just some aviation management type courses. So that's just, I felt like I I wasn't using my brain enough, so I felt like I was losing that ability. So I wanted to do something that would sort of trigger that and stimulate it and do something a little bit different. So it'd be nice to to get a job within sport, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there, and especially within the veterans community, there's a bit of movement towards organisation picking up veterans, and I hope to take up one of those opportunities.
Yeah, great. Well, the other thing that that you could do is take up cactus growing, because we did speak before you came online about your show and tell, and you might show everyone your tremendous cactus over there in the corner. I mean, it's breathtaking. Here we go.
Yeah,
ladies and gentlemen, Curtis McGrath, a cactus farmer.
It's almost about 5 foot tall at the moment, so I have to repot it to make it bigger, but I'm not too keen on making it too big.
It's when you start having to renovate around it that things get weird. No, very cool. Hey, Curtis, a couple of weeks ago was Men's Mental Health Week, and there were a lot of people talking and writing about men's mental health. You're aligned, if I'm correct, with Mates for Mates. I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about what Mates for Mates do to our community.
Yeah, so Mates for Mates is a charity that I got involved with in pretty much right at the end of 2012, during my rehabilitation, and it's a veterans sort of organisation, not run by veterans, but it's an organisation for veterans and their families and current servicemen and women. So that helps them with rehabilitation, psychological services, health and fitness, nutrition, but also for me, and what got me sort of into it was they were doing a big adventure kayak from Sydney to Brisbane, and I don't recommend doing that. Just take the flight; it's much faster. And yeah, it took us about 3 weeks to do. So, and we did the wrong time of year against the wind the whole way. It was pretty rough, but it was still an amazing thing to do, because people were coming together from similar backgrounds through similar adversity and could understand and talk to each other, but also achieve goals together. And that was something that the military does very, very well. But so when you lose that or miss that opportunity, or move away from the military, you feel like you've lost that. So that's what Mates for Mates is about. It's about bringing those people back together to connect, to communicate and talk about what's happening and do things together, and it's a really amazing support network. Unfortunately, I haven't had too much time to be involved with many of the activities recently, but when this whole COVID situation kicked off, I got a lovely phone call from their support network just checking that I was okay and if there was anything they can do. And it's important to reconnect, because I have lost some friends to suicide based on their service, and that's such a tragic situation that we've some veterans have to deal with. And I've been very lucky, and I think it's because I've got a purpose. So I've got a reason to get up in the morning, and I've got a great support network around me. And Mates for Mates is one of those people, or one of those parts. So yeah, definitely. Yeah,
great. And how do you, if you don't mind me asking, how do you attend to your own mental health? You're obviously training a lot, and I imagine a lot of that is solo.
Yeah. So for me, pardon?
So I was just talking about, how do you attend to your own mental health? And because a lot of your sport is perhaps isolating, how do you connect with your mates and prioritise?
Yeah, so, keeping in touch, and, social media and the internet is a wonderful tool to allow connection remotely. And, I've got friends over in Iraq at the moment, and that's nice to be able to talk to them almost on a daily basis. But at the same time, for myself, having a bit of time out, I think is really good in this COVID period, where it's a bit more time at home, a bit more time with my wife, and having the opportunity to chill out and then sort of rethink about what sport is and how we approach the next year. And I think as well as COVID sort of calming everything down in terms of the chaotic lifestyle that was late last year, it's also re-cemented the opportunity to drive towards the goal once we're allowed to travel freely around the country or the world and compete. So it's just one of those things that I've been very lucky to have good support around me, but for me, I really enjoy getting outside and being on the water in the mornings, and living up here on the Gold Coast is a great place to paddle, so it's not too cold.
Yeah, cool. Hey, yeah, we've got a question there from Team Rooster. Now, if you may not know, but we have a fantastic young man in our wheelchair racing community called Warwick Holmes. They call him the Rooster because he breeds chooks out of Bathurst.
I think I've heard of Mr. Rooster.
You know the Rooster? Yeah. There we go. Most people have. And he says, hello, Curtis, and thank you for your service. If there was one piece of advice you could give anyone with or without a disability in terms of sport, what would it be? That's a pretty broad question, but I'm particularly interested in maybe some racing advice, because in the 200 metres, it's all or nothing, right? Like, you've got no time to make a mistake.
No.
Maybe zeroing in on that, some racing advice for the Rooster.
Yeah, so one thing I've spoke about before to a group of young children was about thinking about, rather than thinking about what if, think about what next. So if you do make a mistake in your race or life or anything like that, learn from that mistake. Yep, good, cement it. Good. Now what next? And look forward and think about what you can change. Think about the controllables. The controllables are really, probably a topic in the sports psych that comes up all the time, is putting out all the things that are distracting that you can't control and focusing on the things that you can. And that's really important, especially over a 200 meter race. It's only about 42 seconds or so. And that's not long to correct a mistake or respond to the other competitors. And that's something that I've learnt, and I understand what my strengths are as well. And I do not have a very good start in my race, and I always come from behind. And much to the grief and the relief of my wife and my parents and my mates as well. So they always give me a hard time about having such a bad start. But looking towards your strengths and focusing on those things that you're good at and pushing through. And like I said, controlling the controllables.
Yeah, indeed. No, thank you. And I'm sure the Rooster and all of our athletes take a lot from that, Curtis. So thank you. Now, Jeff Tripp, who's a great friend of our organisation from Basketball New South Wales, talks about your amazing story, of course, that we referenced earlier. Have you tried any other sports? Wheelchair basketball would be a great start. He's obviously, there's some bias going on there with Jeff, but have you had a crack at wheelchair basketball?
I have, and you wouldn't want me on your team because I can't shoot. So one of the sports I did do in the Army, and I made it onto the defence team, was netball. And I was good at netball because I wasn't anywhere near the post to shoot. So I'm a good defender, but that's about it. But I have dabbled in para rowing, which is obviously very similar, but in the aspects of paddling, it's completely almost the opposite. But I did some swimming, I did wheelchair rugby, which I really loved, and I did some archery as well. So I've sort of dabbled in a few different things through the Invictus Games and through veterans sport. And I've been lucky enough to compete in wheelchair rugby, and it's probably, if I could, would be the sport that I would choose if I was classifiable in that sport. So unfortunately, it wouldn't be basketball for me.
There we go. Nice pitch there, Jeff. Unfortunately, we won't get him in a wheelchair basketball chair. And a shout out to Michael Hartung, one of the great friends of our organisation at Veteran Sport Australia. Michael does great work, and our sports team at Wheelchair Sports New South Wales, ACT, has been working with Michael to develop our sports, particularly wheelchair rugby, but also the wheelchair basketball and wheelchair Aussie rules from within the services. So we see just loads of potential there for us to do more and more together with servicemen and women. We've only got a couple of minutes left, Curtis. I just wanted to touch on one more idea, if I may, and that's the idea of fear. I was at a dinner party recently, and we were talking about what scares us. And someone said to me, well, you must be scared because as a 21-year-old, I marked Jonah Lomu head-to-head when I was playing against the New Zealand schoolboys. And I said, well, I wasn't fearful at all. Actually, I wanted the opportunity. I must have been mad at the time. But when you've done all the training and you want to apply those skills and you want to test yourself against the best. However, I am scared of dogs. And, it comes from, an incident when I was a little fella, and I retain to this day an unease around dogs. You've had an extraordinary life experience with things that would terrify most of us. I wondered, does anything scare you?
I wouldn't put my finger on like a particular animal or object or something like that. It's more an emotional feeling of letting people down. And that's, I guess, maybe relating back to that feeling I had when I crossed the line in Rio. But, if you say you're going to do something, you try your hardest to do it and be there for them and be a part of whatever you've said or committed to. And for me, whether that be just rocking up on time or being there for a friend in need. So yeah, it's definitely having that feeling when you've let someone down is definitely, I think, one of the hardest feelings to have.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but we could yarn to you all night. Curtis, we just wanted to say a really big thank you on behalf of our community for joining us for Rolling Conversations tonight. As I say, we love what you do. We follow your career. We will be following you in Tokyo as well, and hoping you go back to back. In fact, and also a gold medal in both events. Now that we understand a bit more about what you do, but as I say, thank you for being part of Rolling Conversations. It's lovely to spend some time with you.
And my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Good night.
Thanks, Curtis. Good night, everyone. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Cheers.